Love on the rocks? Ain't no big surprise. These are the immortal words of Neil Diamond. But when does it apply to your supplier relationships? I've been witness to some very toxic relationships where the balance of power has switched due to a huge financial investment or key supplier contract. This is what I call the monopoly effect. It's not just IT suppliers here. We see this sometimes in long-term maintenance contracts when they're not managed well from either side. So what sort of behaviours are we talking about? The traditional customer-supplier relationship slides from being customer-focused to an equal focus, sometimes referred to as a partnership, and then to a focus on profit and acquisition. I'll hear phrases from the customer side of these relationships like, oh, we can't do that, oh, the supplier wouldn't be happy, and oh, let's not rock the boat, just pay for it. Does that sound familiar? Well, from the other side of the table, it sounds equally dire. When suppliers start telling customers, you can't, the contract says this, there's a notice period before we can do that, or we won't allow that, that'll need signing off. Now, I'm not ignoring the reality of contract law here, nor am I suggesting customer goods supply are bad, but honestly, a lot of these things are actually not related to contracts, they're just perceived to be so, and as they pertain to the supplier relationship, the customer assumes that the supplier is right without checking the contract, which is probably older than Methuselah's pants. In one recent example, the supplier had no contract whatsoever and imagined that all their contractual terms applied because they'd been supplying that organisation for 10 years and that formed the basis of applying complex terms and conditions. Now, just as a disclaimer here, I'm no legal expert and I don't profess to be. In fact, to many of you watching, I will be a supplier and I hope you never recognise those behaviours in our relationship. What I'm saying in this disclaimer is all organisations that need legal advice should probably speak with a lawyer, not watch my YouTube channel. There, that's the disclaimer out of the way. So let me give you some good general advice to health check your supplier relationship and keep things on track. Number 1, does your supplier visit to keep the relationship healthy? Big or small suppliers should keep in contact in a frequency appropriate to the type and value of the supply to make sure that you are happy. Number 2, acting on your feedback. Do they take your feedback on board and act on it? This is a sign that your customer is important to them. If your feedback is reasonable, then they should be keeping you happy. Number 3, somebody is waving the contract around. So when you get to the point that the supplier is citing the contract and emailing you excerpts that suit their argument, you're looking pretty rocky there. Number 4, staff show disengagement. Sometimes the people in charge of the supply arrangements aren't the people feeling the temperature of the water. If your staff day to day are seeking alternatives and workarounds for that supply chain, then it could be time for a serious review. Account managers playing nicey-nicey with directors can be a smokescreen. Number 5, you think it's too expensive to change. The golden cage of changing that supply arrangement can be a serious drag. By the time you realise it's there, you often feel trapped and settle into a huffy but tolerant state with that supplier allowing them to bully you just a bit, but not quite enough for you to fight back. If any of these things are ringing true about your supplier contracts, then I would say there is a 3-step process you can use to take action. Step 1, be open and honest with somebody senior on the other side of the arrangement. I've seen even just a simple change of account manager work wonders. Sometimes it can be just an individual personality on either side, and that refresh resets egos, hearts and minds. If the supplier genuinely cares like their marketing team claims, then they'll probably be horrified and want to work with you to resolve it. Step 2, second opinion. If step 1 hasn't worked, then you probably need a second opinion. Find an independent expert outside the current chain to review the situation, list the issues and suggest improvements in the system, supply chain, or whatever they're looking at. Let them have access to everyone in your business they need, but also to the supplier, like a true arbiter. Try to look at their feedback without taking offence. Commission an honest and two-sided review and be open to the fact that some or all of the blame could lie with you. I've seen excellent software slated by organisations when I've done these reviews before. There has to be a shared responsibility for success. Step 3, still no joy? Then now's the time to start looking about at the costs of divorce. Like with any business arrangement, you have to identify if there's enough weight in the issues to justify the actual cost of change. I'd urge you to consider the non-financial costs too, including customer service, staff morale, and business reputational impact of the continued relationship. Also, consider if the situation continues, could this actually just kick that spending into the long grass and extend your pain and ultimately your cost? If you decide to go, don't let the supplier control the end of your relationship. Your agreement is governed by any contracts between you. If it's a software supplier, remember, your data is yours, not theirs to hold ransom. they need to act in a reasonable way. If it's a contractor, consider if there's any work you could keep with them that they do well. Perhaps the agreement needs to change shape before it fits properly. Lastly, when you're shopping to replace, I'd urge you to consider the alternative supply market. Not just because we're a part of that market, but because fundamental issues that you're seeing in your arrangements could be scale related. I heard a very wise quote from a customer who recently switched their open account support to us. They're a very big landlord and a powerhouse of digital innovation. They said, "I don't want any of my suppliers being bigger than we are. I want them to want my demand more than I need their supply." I recently told another sign-up who just bought our supplier self-service portal when he asked where the contract was. No contract, no tie-in. You're free to leave the moment you're not happy. Sometimes supplier relationships just work and some need cultivation. Take your eye off the ball and remember Neil Diamond's words, "Love on the rocks ain't no big surprise." Now, that's not quite grammatically correct, but let's enjoy the metaphor. If you're under 40, you probably don't know what on earth I'm talking about, but it could be worth a Google. Neil Diamond is an absolute legend. Anyway, whether you like that or not, comment below and let us know, and join the conversation. And while you're there, why not subscribe? Because let's face it, these videos are brilliant.